Hi. Enrique interviewed me for the first time about 20 years ago. So we were remarking on how much younger and thinner and prettier we used to be. And like Lori, I also grew up in a family of alcoholics, but my parents stayed together. So the pain was limited to one marriage. And but my wife's father, an active alcoholic, also got around. So there were 3 Jerome Juniors. I'm Sherman Alexie Jr., and my father died 11 years ago of kidney failure after years on dialysis. I've made it one of my social missions to convince all you men, if you've already done it, you've named your child, your son, after yourself, to feel bad about that. And that if you or somebody you know is thinking about naming their son after themselves, to stop the madness. First of all, it's patriarchal and narcissistic and colonial. Secondly, if things go as they're supposed to, your son is someday going to be at a funeral where his name is on the damn tombstone. Now, you're already guaranteed to have father issues. You don't need visual proof of how long your father's death is going to stay with you. I was at the funeral, and we had dropped dirt into the grave, and they started the machine to lower the coffin into the grave. And that's the first time I'd ever seen one of those machines on the res. Usually we did it more old school, where you'd have the pallbearers lower it with ropes, but I'm rich, so I thought, all right, Dad, you're getting the machine. And I was standing at the head of the grave, not because I'm the oldest son or not because of anything ceremonial. I mean, that's one of the problems, one of the joys of being Indian, is that everybody thinks everything we do at any given moment has some ancient meaning. Indians don't get to have accidents. And I accidentally ended up standing at the foot of the grave as the coffin was being lowered. And even in that moment, I'm very proud of it. I'm thinking, yeah, Dad, you got this machine. This machine cost me $500 to rent today. That's more than you made in some months during my childhood, Dad. I've come a long way. But as it was lowering, and I was looking, my name and he died, like I said, 11 years ago. And I was talking to my table mates about some of our losses, and the grief has not abated. It's changed shape. That's really the only way I can talk about it. And in some sense, he's not really gone, or at least he's coming back day by day, because as I look in the mirror, this thing, I mean, it's like I could carry things in there. My son plays with it. And he's 12, and he'll be sitting there, and we'll be watching TV, and I'll realize he's been tugging on my jowl for 4 innings. And he goes, Dad, am I going to get this? And I say, well, I mean, part of it is, weight gain and such, but it doesn't really matter. You could be thin and a marathon runner, and you're still going to get the Alexie jowl. And he said, thanks, Dad. And I'm really starting to look like him in the shower. mean, I shower with my eyes closed now because nobody really needs to see that. And I've got it memorized, so I you know. And if our bodies are stories, then mine is a series of increasingly bitter endings. I mean, the big thing for me as I change, as I come to resemble my father, there's also the ways in which I don't resemble him. I have grown way too much chest hair for an Indian, which makes me realize that one of the stories one of my grandmothers told about her pregnancy was a lie. I think somewhere in my past there's a Russian that none of us know about. And I didn't even have the joy of having the Tom Selleck, dark, testosterone-looking chest hair. I got it 3 years ago. So my chest hair actually grew in gray. And it's almost in a perfect circle. So it's like a target over my heart. And I tell you this, the ways in which I physically and don't physically resemble my father, to let you know when he was on dialysis, his body, the state of his body, became the constant topic of conversation, the constant worry, the constant fear. I mean, one of the bad parts about that is he ends up being objectified. He objectifies himself. We objectify him. And even with the most loving care, his healthcare professionals also objectify him. It's necessary. He becomes his kidneys. And he hated it. Oh, he hated dialysis. He would call me up from dialysis to tell me how much he hated dialysis. I wouldn't even answer the phone. I'm so glad he didn't text. Because like my father, he and I share a potty mouth, so I'm sure I would have had a long series of fuck dialysis messages. I only went with him once. I moved to Seattle 20 years ago, and he started dialysis long after I'd moved. And I went with him to dialysis in Spokane, and we sat there. And sat there. And sat there. I hadn't sat with my father for that many hours since I was a kid. Now, he was a Coeur d'Alene Indian, I'm Spokane Coeur d'Alene Indian, and we have all that history, all that pain and magic of being native and being from the reservation and being daily connected to your tribe and the storytelling traditions and the powwows and the ceremonies. But we were also straight American males, so we sat there without really saying anything to each other. I never had that moment with my father as he was dying. I mean, I can get up in front of you and tell you anything. I can tell you, strangers, the details of my emotional life and what I'm afraid of and what I want and my various physical, spiritual, and emotional hungers. But I couldn't say anything to my dad. And the weirdest part of that was sitting there and watching the nurses come up and then seeing my dad light up. That's not a phrase that I ever associated with my father. Yeah, Dad lit up. Not to say he was mean. I mean, he was a very sweet man, just quiet, shy, reserved. And he would light up. And my first instinct was jealousy. It's like, man, you light up for these white women. But then I realized that somebody was taking care of him. Somebody with no other expectations of him. And the weird thing is I realized he was probably enjoying the healthiest relationships of his life with the nurses while he was doing dialysis. They came to his funeral. I miss him. I miss those nurses. I don't miss his pain. I don't know the current technology. I don't know the vocabulary anymore. I assume it's gotten better. I assume it keeps getting better. I have these vague ideas about what it might be now, like what it's going to be. Maybe we're just going to be like Legos eventually. We'll be growing kidneys on a farm and you'll just click them in and click them out. Of course, that will create a whole new set of problems we'll have to have fundraisers for. But I don't know what I feel about dialysis. Last night, lying on the couch, I was in my thinking mode, which means I lie on the red couch in the corner of our living room, thinking mode, which many of you would call napping. And I was lying there last night, wondering what I was going to talk about today. And I didn't know. It's been 11 years. I didn't know. And I gave the last time I talked here was only a month after my father had passed. So I had the immediate pain to talk about. I had that immediate processing. And I was laying there last night. I got out the folder of information they gave me, and it made me cry with all these amazing stories. And I keep seeing breakfast of hope, breakfast of hope, breakfast of hope. And first of all, I've never associated early morning with hope. I mean, if I was running this, it would have been called, the breakfast of a vague existential malaise. And there'd be 5 people here. As I lay there, I kept thinking, I miss him, I miss him, I miss him. I kept thinking, I miss the nurses. I hate dialysis. Fuck dialysis. I love dialysis. All this stuff. And then it came down to this. Dialysis gave us 6 more years with my father. And at the time, I didn't measure it that way. That's 6 more years of stories. That's 6 more years of all of us telling the stories of all the other years before those 6 years. Because what of our lives is a series of stories told again and again and again. All of our lives are a series of inside jokes. All of our stories are a dictionary of family idioms. And in the end, I guess my dad's is called dialysis. You gave him 6 years. He was 62 when he died. That's about 10%. He got to see my sons born, his grandsons. My younger one doesn't remember him. So last night, I was telling my son about him and showing the photographs of my father holding him when he was a baby. And my son said, "Well, what was he like?" And I said, "Well, he was quiet." My son said, "So not like you?" I said, "No." I said, "Well, and he was really kind." "So not like you?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "He was in tremendous amounts of pain." And my son said, "Like everybody." You could really trace my father's dialysis back to the beginning of his story. The reason why he spent a lifetime drinking and making bad choices that led to dialysis and failure. So his father died in World War II on Okinawa, and his mother died of tuberculosis 6 months after that. So my father and his sister were essentially war orphans. So if you want to talk about stories, my father's story began with war and ended with kidney failure. So I told my son this, and he's heard it before, but he wanted to hear it again. And then I got poetic on him, because that's what I do. I said, what dialysis is filtering out the impurities. Your kidneys aren't working the way they're supposed to, so you filter out the impurities. It makes it function. I mean, your kidney is supposed to do it on its own, but it can't. It needs help. It gets sick. Sometimes you need a new one. Filter out the impurities. And so I said, so what's happened, you have this life now, my little one, because I have filtered out more of the impurities of these terrible lives that reservation Indians are supposed to live sometimes. In fact, you could say my writing career has been a sort of dialysis for me. And now for you, you rich little shit. And he laughed. He's been rapping lately, which would make my father laugh so hard. And he's been getting into the early 80s rap, very politically minded. My little communist rapping son. But he is extraordinarily privileged. He is. I'm in the 1%, and I did it with books, which is nuts, but he's aware of this. And what legacy do you pass down from this pain when your child has far less pain than your father did? How do you talk about that? How do you explain that? How do you teach your child not to become a jerk? And he says to me, "Dad, I've come up with my rap name." I said, yeah, worried. He said, yeah, my rap name's going to be Lil Privilege. And I said, that sounds like something your grandfather would have said. Because above all else, he was funny. I get to say all these things about my father. I get to remember him. I get to talk about him. I get to talk to you about him. Because dialysis gave him 6 more years. And it gives some of you decades, entire lifetimes. And I'm jealous of you fortunate assholes. It's time. You're supporting time. That's what we're here for today, is to support time. I'm going to finish with a poem about my papa. It's called Traveling. Upon arrival, I collect my baggage and walk across the bridge into the parking structure where I discover to my embarrassment that I've been gone too long and have forgotten where I left my car. From floor to floor, aisle to aisle, I walk and walk and walk through the SeaTac airport parking structure, searching. I'm in a Seinfeld episode with better hair. Growing weary and angry, my bags are heavy, too heavy, so I leave them by an elevator and hope that I find my car and return to them before a thief steals them or airport security confiscates and destroys what they think could be an explosive device. Isn't everything, in the end, an explosive device? Finally, I think to look in my wallet for my parking stub, and I find it, and yes, I've written down the row and number, so I rush to the location and find an unfamiliar car, a small black hatchback that disturbingly resembles an insect. This is not my car. But I insert my key into the lock and it works, so it must be my car. I take the driver's seat and insert the key into the ignition, but the engine will not turn, will not turn over. The battery is dead. I have no power. And then I smell something sweet and sickening. I know that smell. It's death. Suddenly terrified, I look from the back seat. I look into the back seat and see what must be a body wrapped in garbage bags. Jesus. I want to run, but I need to know who is dead in the back seat of this car. That must not be my car, but it is my car. So I pull back the garbage bag over the corpse's head, and it's my father. Oh God, it's my father. What is his body doing here? We buried him 6 years ago on the res. I threw a handful of dirt on his coffin, and yet here he is. And his body is strangely preserved, as if he had just died yesterday. And then I am rocked backward when I notice that my father is breathing shallowly. I leap over the seat and land on my father. I shake and shake and shake and shake and shake him, but he will not wake. He will not open his eyes. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, I shout. I pound on his chest, on his heart, and I slap his face, and I grab him by the shoulders, and I shake him some more until he opens his eyes. Barely conscious, barely aware, and I scream at him to come back to me, come back to me, but he falls into sleep, so I punch him in the face and bloody his nose, and I punch him in the gut and hear the air escape his lungs, and I punch him in the crotch, and that does the trick. My father sits up straight, his eyes snap wide open, and he looks at me. He sees me, and he asks, "Junior, where have you been? Where have you been?" And I say, "I've been on a trip, Dad. A long journey away from home, but I'm here now, and I'm not leaving again. I'll stay with you." And I ask, "But how are you here? How are you alive?" And he says, I don't know. And then I'm awake. I sit up in bed. It's cold. Our furnace is too small to properly heat our house during a serious freeze. But wait, it's not freezing outside. It's unseasonably warm, and then I realize that something is in the bedroom with me. I'm alone here because my wife is sleeping beside our sick son in his bedroom. Perhaps our other son has found his way into the room, but no. Something large is standing in the corner. Oh God, it's a ghost. It's my father's ghost. No, it's my grief. And it opens its mouth and it wails so loud that it hurts to hear. My eardrums vibrate. And so I snap on the lamp and realize that my grief is not standing in the corner. It's not a ghost either. It's a bookshelf. I was frightened by a bookshelf, which is a bad thing for a writer to say. It's funny. So I laugh and I lie back down thinking that I might find a way back to sleep, but instead I weep for my father. I weep for my father. He's been dead for 6 years. For 6 years, after years of dialysis. When he died, I cut my long hair. By custom, I can grow back my hair when my grief abates, but oh, my grief floods my bedroom tonight. My bed becomes a raft, and I float up toward the ceiling. I bump against the ceiling. I am crushed against the ceiling, and I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't. Perhaps I am dying. Perhaps my grief will murder me. Perhaps my grief will wrap my corpse in garbage bags and leave it in the back seat of a strange car parked at the airport. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. As the grief flood crushes my lungs against the ceiling, I become a part of the ceiling. I am the ceiling, and then suddenly I'm awake again. Damn it, it was a dream within a dream, a nightmare within a nightmare. I hate when this happens, and I'm sitting on an airplane weeping. Beside me, a woman in a business suit is also weeping. "Are you okay?" I ask her. And she smiles and says, "I'm crying because you were crying in your sleep and I couldn't wake you. None of us could wake you." And so the pilot's now making an emergency landing in Pittsburgh. There's going to be an ambulance waiting for you. But I'm awake now, I think. But don't say. I know I must stop this plane from landing. I must stop the pilot. So I race to the cockpit door and I pound and pound and pound and pound on the thin metal frame, forgetting we live in the age of terror. And so I have unwittingly become a threat to the safety of this plane and its passengers. And am knocked to the floor and buried beneath a dozen men who punch and kick me, who gouge my eyes and chew on my fingers and ears. I fight back, I don't fight back, I fight back, I don't fight back, and then I really fight back. I am suddenly so strong that nothing can defeat me. I toss the men aside and I smash through the cockpit door, and I'm once again shocked to see my father, who was now the pilot of this plane. And we are plummeting toward the ground. "We're going to crash," he says. "We're all going to crash." And I say, I know. And I try to keep my eyes open. I want to see what happens to us. I want to stay inside this nightmare, inside a nightmare, inside a nightmare. I want to see what happens to us. And as the ground rises to meet us, I see that it is beautiful. The world is beautiful. My father is beautiful. I am beautiful. Dialysis is beautiful. Death is beautiful. And oh, I lean against the force of my grief, and I know that I will wake again. I know this is a dream, a nightmare inside a nightmare, wrapped in a nightmare, and I want to stay. I want to stay, but I want to stay here for a little while longer, here for a little while longer. I want to stay with my Father, my pilot. So I stagger into the empty co-pilot seat. And I take the controls. And together, my Father and I try to pull us out of this spectacular dive. Thank you for your time.